I'm PJ.
And I'm Dani.
And it is 10:30 in the morning, and this is the Looking Glass podcast.
And we didn't sleep last night because we saw City of Bones.
It was good.
It was very good.
I liked it. It was...
We're going to get into the critical backlash later because I was going to rage, but it's not time to rage yet, guys. We're not there.
We're not angry yet.
Now we're still happy and very content with the movie we had.
As you can see, Dani is actually wearing her City of Bones shirt. I'm wearing a shirt that I got from the little kids section of Target.
And I can actually recommend the Morgenstern ring and the Jace necklace that Hot Topic are selling, because they're of fairly good quality for the price. Again, as always, spoiler free review. The movie overall had awesome visuals. Like, the special effects were obviously special effects at times, but not bad ones.
And we also saw it in IMAX and
yes.
ridiculous quality,
which we also recommend.
I thought that the IMAX was going to try and take away and make the CG look really CG.
No,
but it was just good.
It was really immersive. Like, the opening scene, this is not a spoiler, don't yell at me. The opening scene is the cityscape, and I was just sitting there looking back and forth across the screen because the IMAX was kind of awesome.
It was very good. It was also very loud at times.
Yeah.
That was the only downside to IMAX, is that it's very, very loud.
We also sat halfway back to the theater, which I recommend, because then you can see the whole screen and you can hear all the things.
Surround sound. It's good for you.
I really recommend reading the book before you go to the movie, and there are other movies that I would also recommend this for. If you ever watch the Dune movie, make sure you've read the book, because it makes zero sense if you haven't. It's really hard to follow. This is kind of similar. Unless you know what's going on, it can be a little difficult to follow. They do explain things, it's just explained very quickly at times and goes from thing to thing, and certain things you wouldn't really understand unless you knew the context of them. For example, how the thing with Magnus begins to come up.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's bits in the beginning of the movie that kind of lead in, but unless you know kind of what's going on, it's very difficult to follow that to some extent. It's there, but it doesn't make much sense unless you know what is happening. So we do recommend reading the book, and if you have read the book, I mean, it had backstory, it had plenty of exposition, but it was nicely broken up. The exposition and the backstory was separated out with other things. The imagery was great, the actors are flawlessly cast, we love all of them dearly. Even Isabel, we're okay with Isabel now. We had mixed feelings about Isabel before this, but she did pretty well.
I just had mixed feelings of Isabel because we saw nothing of her.
Yeah,
ever
she was kind of
anything.
invisible in the promotional materials, but she's pretty badass, and we like it. So, now we're moving on to the spoiler version. Keep in mind that between PJ and I, we have read literally all of the books. We've read all of the Infernal Devices books and all of the Mortal Instruments books. He's still working on some of those. But there will probably be spoilers at least through City of Ashes at points.
I'd even say City of Glass.
We don't have to get into the thing, though.
We don't have to. We won't.
There may be a spoiler in reference to an ongoing plot arc for City of Glass. We may or may not include it. We will give you a heads up if that happens. But overall, there will be spoilers for City of Ash only because the movie kind of did a thing.
The movie kind of did it did a thing. It did a thing.
It did lots of the things, but it kind of did a thing, and we're going to discuss that, and in discussing that, we do kind of have to get into some events in Ashes, and the validity thereof. Now, the spoiler version, you have been warned. Right now, we're talking movie spoilers. We will make a note when they are book spoilers as well. We assume you've read the book and watched the movie at this point. So, there is a line in the movie, dialogue spoiler, where, don't make fun of my spoiler hands. There's a line where Hodge says, and if you didn't know yet, again, spoilers for book 1, Hodge is a baddie. But
he's just misguided.
He's kind of a dick. Hodge is not a good dude. But regardless, he makes a comment to Valentine to the effect of, lie to them and tell them that they're both your children. And this is kind of, again, the spoiler for City of Ashes. You already know there's kind of incest if you've read City of Bones. But basically what it gets down to is, in the end, there's a lot of confusion over who's actually related in this series.
I don't even think the author knows who's related and she's pulling shit out of her
As
ass.
much as we love Cassie, we feel like she might not know anymore, given that we've read most of the series.
You know, she's probably just sitting there laughing and typing away.
But that line initially made all of us, like, the group of us that went to the theater, really angry, because we were like, that's a giant spoiler, and that's not even in this book. But the more we thought about it, the more okay with it we are, and here's why.
It was also a really quick line.
Yes, it was very
quick.
quick.
If you weren't paying attention to it or were waiting for the topic to come up, I don't think you would have paid attention to it.
It was a throwaway line, and there was a lot of material on the idea that they actually were related in terms of the storyline. And at the again, they kind of did a fix-it thing at the end. But here's why we're okay with it overall. Because firstly, as far as we recall, Hodge knows a bit about the whole Michael Whalen situation. So, to his knowledge, he may actually think that Jace is not Valentine's son. Because he does have some knowledge of the situation that went down with Michael Whalen. Again, we're not going to get into that specifically because that is a spoiler for book 2. But if you've read book 2, you know what we speak of. And that I'm okay with, because, again, there's a lot of ambiguity, and to illustrate that, they kind of did have to throw it all out there on the table, because it would be very difficult to follow, I think, in a visual narrative if they didn't get it set up first. And the other reason I'm okay with it is because this movie has a lot going on in terms of things that people generally aren't okay with.
Should we talk about those things?
I mean, we have a person of color in essentially a lead role. We have a gay character in basically a lead role, because I do view this as an ensemble cast. This is not Clary and Jace's story.
Yeah.
This is not even
everybody.
Clary's story. It's basically Clary and friends. And I mean, it is, like, especially in the later books, you get a lot more involvement from from the side characters.
Just because I'm picturing the cast of City Bones hosting Barney and Friends now.
Oh, Jesus.
And that's what I'm picturing. God damn it.
Special imagery. But, yeah. I mean, it's really not a story about Clary and Jace. And overall, in the books, the idea of incest is not really that important. Like, when it comes down to it, it deals with a lot of the romantic conflicts, but in terms of the overarching themes, it's not really something that's addressed. And I also feel like, in terms of representation, between consenting adults is one thing, in terms of things like Game of Thrones portraying that kind of idea, but when you're dealing with accidental incest and teens and people that are all confused and not sure what's going on, it was something that was a risk that I don't feel was necessary to portray, given that, you know, Alec is definitely gay. Alec is really gay. Like,
Alec is very gay.
Alec is very into Jace, too, and we like that.
I like how there are lots of characters that people like to think that are gay.
But no, Alec's very gay.
And then you have an actual gay character that no one really talks about.
I think one of our favorite oh shit lines in the movie was Alec rolling up and being like, stay away from Jace to Clary. This is one of their first interactions, and we're like, wow! It was a little more blunt, and they did have the altercations between Clary and Isabel and between Clary and Alec regarding the idea of Alec being gay. So they dealt with it, but it really wasn't acknowledged by any of the characters other than those conflicts, and we liked that. Magnus, I don't think was explicitly stated to be gay in this movie.
No, he just said that Alec was pretty.
No, that's right, he did say that Alec was pretty, so, I mean, they did...
But he could just be sexual.
They were very much more open about Alec being gay in the portrayal than about Magnus's sexuality. And I kind of like that, if only because, you know, Magnus wearing glitter eyeliner, playing into a lot of the stereotypes I think about what gay or flamboyant people are. I feel like, not that it's not valuable as representation, because there absolutely are people that do enjoy those kinds of styles that are gay, but that it was kind of more important to focus on Alec's story right now, because Alec is dealing with a lot of things that aren't really acknowledged in media, in terms of being around a close friend and having feelings for that friend, and especially if you're both dudes and you're both warriors. That's a thing that doesn't really happen, except for Alexander. We don't talk about that movie.
Oh, that's something else that they looked at. That's something else that
What?
they looked at in the movie. They didn't even mention pertains.
Yeah, like, that was one of the things that was missing, and it wasn't entirely missing because they did still show a lot of closeness, but it almost came off more as Alec wanting to be with Jace than Alec being paired with Jace. Although they do have the confrontation where Isabel basically blames Jace, in that she says, you know, it's your fault this is happening, he can't not be there when you're putting us in danger. So it's kind of in the background, but it's never brought up. I'm thinking they'll probably bring it up more in the next movie, because that's where it comes into play with other characters as well. There was a thing that we did not expect, and we knew it was going on, but we did see it with two people that haven't read Ashes, and I don't think either of them picked up on it, honestly. Like, we were sitting in one side going, oh my god, the thing, but no one else reacted.
This is the spoiler part of the thing. We're allowed to say it.
Yeah, but I just want to establish that, have you not read City of Ashes, this is not going to be an overt spoiler. It was fairly subtle, and I appreciate that they did it that way. They do the thing.
Should we just come out and say
Yeah, say the thing.
Simon's a vampire.
And you find this out pretty early on in City of Ashes, honestly.
It's the first page.
Yeah,
so the sunlight's giving him a headache.
But they kind of introduced a little bit of the symptomatic stuff with Simon to kind of link it.
Like how he doesn't need his glasses anymore.
He also wasn't a rat, but I'm okay with that. He was
but
drugged.
That's weird.
He was drugged and he was used as bait.
Yeah.
Which kind of makes more sense.
Because, it's alright, because like the thing with the rat, it's cool because in the book he gets transformed into a rat and then bites one of the vampires to get away, and that's how he
gets infected.
Yeah, and I feel like this made a movie flow more. Because
the whole rat thing would have just been odd to try and portray visually with the pace of the movie. Like, it was cool and all, but he was essentially drugged and then used as bait to get Clary and to get the cup. And that also brought in the idea that Valentine really isn't the only entity that wants the cup. Like, everybody wants it. So you have demons coming after the cup, and that was established with Simon, and then he starts having headaches, and he doesn't need his glasses, and we're like, oh shit.
And he has two little holes.
He has two little puncture wounds
right
that
there.
look kind of infected. It's gnarly.
And I was poking my friend who I was sitting next to, like, just pointing.
Just like, walk the thing.
And
we
she
did that
was
a lot.
simultaneously doing that too. Let's also talk about demons being able to enter the Institute.
Yeah, that was one of the things that we spent a long time talking about.
I think that's the entire thing that we talked about during breakfast.
Yeah. Because basically, in the movie, there are demons in the Institute, which is not a thing that's supposed to be able to happen. And we were like, what? No. But again, the more we thought about this, the more we're kind of okay with it because it's rationalized in a couple ways.
They don't really enter the Institute. They're portaled into.
Essentially, like, Valentine being Valentine opens a portal into hell because that's the thing that bad guys do.
It's like at the end of the Silent Hill movie, the first one, where Alessa goes inside, I can't remember her name, but she goes inside the main character, and then main character gets stabbed inside of the church, which is the only safe part in the town, and then she starts bleeding everywhere, which releases Alessa's angry 8-year-oldness. And so it's okay. And so it's okay.
But basically, two things come into play here. We've established that downworlders can't enter the Institute, and we've established that demon wardings exist. But we have not established whether demons can enter from inside a warding. Because the wardings are made to keep them out, and they've established that if the wardings fail, the demons can get in places like Alicante when we get to that. So, theoretically, if why are you giggling?
Yeah.
But theoretically, if they're brought in, they can be there, because they never show downworlders. No? Okay, yeah, they rationalize that too, in terms of Luke's pack. Because they do clearly make a differentiation between downworlders entering the Institute and demons being there as summoned. And it also appeared that it might have been the courtyard, where they do establish that there are areas off of the hallowed ground where downworlders can be brought to the Institute. And it was a courtyard space. We're giving them plausible deniability and that it might have been that area.
It could have been a courtyard. It could have been an observatory. It's never really explained too much.
They don't really say where it is.
But that's okay.
And it also gives Izzy an excuse to use a flamethrower, which we're totally okay with.
She needed more screen time.
She did.
She did.
She was badass. But the downworlder thing is addressed in that Luke brings not his pack, because we figured this out. His old pack, where he was second in command, he brings to the Institute to come to the aid of Shadowhunters to try and fight the demons and whatnot. And spoiler time, most of them die in the process.
I think all of them die in the
yeah,
process.
I think eventually all of them die. It's sad. But basically they do have offhanded comments later on that Luke gets a new pack because he's left packless earlier on. So to have that background in, and they do say that they, have to stay human in the Institute, and mostly do that, although there's some loopholing happening.
They don't fully transform the wolves.
Yeah, there's
They
a lot
just
of,
kind of
partial transformation happening, where they're not quite downworlders, which, doesn't necessarily pass muster, but it was a small issue.
It was a small thing, and that's okay. They handled it well.
Speaking of not so small things, the garden scene. From what we recall in the books, it's supposed to be very sweet and smoochy and adorable and chivalrous.
And it was definitely about to hop on that. It was...
yeah, there was some dry humpage happening. We're not against this, because Chase obviously does want to get on it. But there definitely was a lot of making out, more than we expected. But the garden scene is there, and they kiss.
And a great MTV soundtrack. That was nice.
The soundtrack was lovely. It was definitely a little special in places.
It was...
The AFI, guys.
AFI remix during Magnus's party.
Which is perfect.
It was good. I was when it happened, it couldn't have happened anywhere else. That's where it needed to be. Let's just take a brief minute to talk about Valentine's. What?
I didn't think it was possible to make Jonathan Rhys-Meyers unattractive.
And
he's still kind of attractive, but that's probably the worst I've seen him look. They gave him weird dread mullet.
Well, he's supposed to be creepy and weird looking.
I mean, we think that it was an attempt to make him appear visually, kind of off balance.
He did not look sane.
Yeah, he didn't. He definitely was a little bit over-exaggerated in the lost his marbles department.
Yeah, okay. His hair was...
He had the regular short, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers hair that was kind of short, and then he had dreads.
Dreaded mullet. And it was... It was interesting.
Again, he wasn't entirely unattractive. It just was not the choice we would have made.
It was business in the front and psycho in the back. I think that's what we agreed on.
That would be the most accurate description of that unfortunate haircut that I can come to.
Yeah. People describe it as the next Twilight.
There's been a lot, I read critical things because I wanted to know how the movie was doing. And there were a lot of people that wrote a lot of really sassy articles that kind of missed the point entirely. One of which called I Am Number 4 a Twilight copy, which I was really perplexed by. Because, what?
Guess I need to rewatch I Am Number 4.
Is that there?
They called the host.
Yeah. I was like...
That's like calling Lord of the Rings a Covet of the Hoppy.
Here's the thing. The two major complaints I've seen critically are basically...
I fucked that up a lot.
What? What'd you do?
I fucked it up.
You did a thing?
I said calling Lord of the Rings a copy of The Hobbit, but I said a Covet of the Hoppy.
Clarification. But... just gonna go back there for a minute. But basically... What were we talking about again? That's what happens when we podcast live, guys.
Being the new Twilight.
Right, okay. So, the Shadowhunters are tagged as goth kids. Here's the issue I have with that. Wearing black and wearing leather are both very practical choices when you spend most of your time trying to stab things that are trying to stab you back.
When your clothes get covered in blood, the easiest way to get blood out of your clothes is you don't.
So
when you have leather, you just kind of rinse it off, and you're good.
Like, the Shadowhunters were definitely dressed fairly practically, except that one time after Magnus's party.
They were dressed appropriately. I was okay with it.
Dressed to the crotch.
I was alright with it.
But, yeah, basically the Shadowhunter gear, while it could be read as goth, was definitely practical fighting attire, and it was always described as being leathers and blacks and kind of utilitarian. And it is. There was also a complaint that everything was thrown at the wall to see what would stick. Here's the gripe I have with this, and this is a spoiler, I don't remember for which book, but no, it's in the first book, the Downworlders explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, the reason why there are different varieties of, you know, Downworlders is that they're all variations of different diseases or
demons.
Interbreeding with demons. So it's not like it was just like, we're going to have all the things. Like, the things are there, which makes sense, because it's kind of like American Gods, in the sense that it brings in all of these popular mythologies and says, but wait, they're actually there.
Yeah, like, a warlock is made when a demon has sex with a human, and then vampires are started when a demon bit a person and then infected them with a disease, making vampires, and they can't...
And the fairies are older than... Like, they're just supernatural beings, I think the fairies are.
Yeah.
They're just described as being older. But basically, it all makes sense if you take 5 seconds to consider the book, and it's not just an appeal to different varieties of supernatural YA, and while we're on that topic, Twilight is not the first to the last supernatural YA story. If anything, that book didn't need werewolves.
I think it just needed more werewolves.
Less vampires?
Yeah. I don't know, that... The same thing is happening with... the same thing happened with Vampire Diaries. I feel like I don't care about the vampires anymore. I'm more interested in the werewolves.
Yeah.
Same thing with True Blood.
I feel like True Blood is the perpetrator of the throw everything at the wall and see what sticks business. Like, I've heard fans of True Blood complain that things just pop up with no explanation and no point.
Yeah. But
So-
it's funny, though. It's fun.
But, like, on that idea, Shadowhunters are really entirely their own mythology. Like, it's all constructed. So, to say that it's the next Twilight isn't really correct in any perception that I have of it. Because Twilight was a story predominantly about vampires. And this is a story predominantly about
Saving
a
the
good
world.
versus evil battle. Yeah, it's about saving the world from bad things. It's got a very kind of religious undertone to it. Not in the sense that it's based off of any particular religion, but that it has a kind of savior aspect to it, where there's this idea of protecting and being given particular powers to go about that idea of protecting.
Also, when you were saying that it was throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, I feel like that also happened with, like, what genre it is. Like, it has, like, horror elements, it has comedy, it has drama, it has romance, it has action.
But I feel like
it's
that's
almost
kind
like everything thrown into one.
And it's kind
and
of
it
like that's kind
works.
of real life. Like
Yeah.
that, like in real
It's
life, you
good.
have bad things happen.
And
You have
good
scary
things
things happen. You have good things happen. You make out with the person you want to make out with sometimes.
And sometimes they're not the person you should be making out with.
Sometimes you think they're their sibling, and there was a lot of really amusing angst faces at that point.
There's a lot of really good stuff. Another thing that a review talked about was that it was hard to follow, that everything was just kind of happening at once, and that it kind of was like an info dump.
Can I sidebar rage for a minute?
Sidebar rage.
Okay, here's the thing with that. No one bitched about Dune. No one bitched about 2001: A Space Odyssey. Well, they did, but for different reasons. It's bad in the movie. But, like, if this series had been written by a dude and had a male protagonist, I hate to say this, but I really feel like there wouldn't be that amount of backlash towards, oh, it's supernatural romance, because it's not. Like, in the grand scheme of things, who is or isn't kissing is a fairly small part of this book.
Yeah.
Like, the series in general is not that focused, or like, it doesn't matter when people kiss other than to the people that kiss.
And that's okay.
That's how it should be. Like, sometimes you suck face with people, but it shouldn't be the main focus of the book, except for in cases where that is the main focus of the book, like romance books.
And this is not a romance novel, and it's not a romance series.
But there was a lot of, oh, well, I don't know what's going on. And I was like, yeah, God forbid a YA novel have a complex mythology. Which, back to PJ.
I like it when things have complex mythologies. Like, I really like epic fantasy. It's like when a book has a map on the first page of the world that it takes place, I get really excited because that means the author cares. And this doesn't, but it takes place in different
and it does have geographical locations, too.
Yeah, it does have geographic locations that you can relate to. Like, it talks about New York. Infernal Devices takes place in London. And her next series is taking place in LA.
Infernal Devices. It's beautiful.
It's, God damn it. I'm still angry.
And I can't say the thing yet, because he hasn't gotten there, and you haven't gotten there. But there is essentially a non-traditional relationship happening.
Oh, I know about that.
You know about the thing?
I know about that.
Okay.
Tumblr.
Ha! That, yes. He likes to get spoiled on Tumblr. And
because I think it's awesome because it gets me excited.
But, like, I can't say this without being a spoiler, which
it's
sucks.
Okay. Just do it.
Alright. There is a minor relationship-based spoiler for Infernal Devices that's about to happen. Stick your fingers in your ears and go la 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 for about 5 seconds if you don't want that to happen. Basically, the main characters are essentially involved in a polyamorous triad in Infernal Devices, and it's kind of awesome. Like, it's, for all intents and purposes, spelled out. Like, yeah, at no point does she go, hey... Again, spoilers. There's going to be a specific spoiler now. Spoilers! Will and Jem are basically queer platonic. Like, they're definitely not just brothers. It's definitely more than Alec and Jace as well. It's not just fighting partners either. Like, they are very close, and that's really nice to see, because sometimes you want to see dudes that really like each other, but don't want to suck face with each other.
Because platonic friendships and relationships can exist.
And we like it! We like that there is essentially a platonic relationship in that book. It's awesome! We like the amount of things that happen. There was an adorable gay couple that came with their small child to see Mortal Instruments, and there were also a lot of various ethnicities in the theater, and that was something that was really cool to see, because we went to see Percy Jackson, it was all white people.
It was.
Because Percy Jackson has a fairly narrow appeal. But it's really nice to see people that this, you know, matters to coming out and supporting this movie, and the series in general has a lot of diversity in a lot of different ways, and it's great.
Also, what I liked about Infernal Devices is that it's almost the exact opposite of the love triangle that happens in Twilight, where Jacob and Edward are constantly like, no, she's mine, no, she's mine, and then Gemini are like, oh no, you take her, no, you take her, and it's great. If it is the next Twilight, I hope that...
We like that kind of Twilight. We're okay with it.
If it is the next Twilight, then I'm excited to see what's going to be the next Mortal Instruments. But yeah, talking back on mythology, I really like it when universes create their own mythologies, because I like learning about, like, different beliefs, and when it opens up, like, a new universe, and I'm just like, yes, this is awesome! And
it's really interesting that there is definitely an entirely, like, not entirely unique because it's happened before, but a sense of mythology that's not really rooted in good or evil. It's rooted kind of in obedience.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see that, and to see how that affects the characters. And, like, in what ways they accept or reject it in what situations. Because obedience isn't inherently good or bad. It can be either. So to have a system of morality and of rules based almost entirely on obedience. And it's of a non-elect... Well, no, they are elected after a fashion. It's kind of parliamenty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, the Clave has a little bit of a parliament aspect to it, in that it's basically elected after a fashion. It's just not fully democratic. And to have that body basically deciding, out of essentially tradition alone, what is or isn't correct, and having next to no change, creates some interesting questions and issues for the characters in both the Infernal Devices and the Mortal Instruments, where there are things that they don't really believe to be wrong, but they know that they aren't allowed to do. So the way they address those things is really interesting because it's kind of a lot more real world than having, you know, good or evil people. And you have a lot of, you know, characters that are either morally ambiguous or do good things for bad reasons or vice versa.
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of complex morality for being a YA book, and that's not at all to talk down towards YA books. But in general, with supernatural YA, it seems to be a lot more good or evil inherently. Whereas this is all kind of gray area, and it's a really interesting way to see the characters navigate that gray area.
Yeah. Not even gonna...
We're done with show notes, guys, and now it's just us, which means this can only get better.
Let's see. What was my favorite part?
I really like Godfrey Gao and, like, his entrance.
I really like Jace's one-liners.
There was so much sass in this movie. So much sass from everyone.
Simon was good.
Everybody in this movie was really sassy. But,
And
like,
Isabel just wrecking Hotel du Mort. That was just beating
basically
the...
Isabel just, like, stabs everything and
She
burns
has her
it.
whips it behind her. A vampire grabs and starts dragging her down a table. While she's being dragged, she's still stabbing everybody coming after her. And I was just like, ugh.
Isabel is probably, like, the most badass person in this movie.
Yeah.
Like,
But she was also the most badass in the books.
I mean, theoretically, Jace is supposed to be kicking some ass, and he's more, like, Jace tends to be busier making really lusty looks at Clary most of the time. Which is okay, because sometimes you're a teenager and you really want to bone somebody.
Sometimes you just want to get your dick wet.
And that's basically the story of Jace's life. And the demon motorcycle appears.
Oh,
But...
it's a demon cafe racer from 1973.
It's awesome.
It was pretty good.
And it doesn't fly, but only because he picks up his sister during the day, and there's a really hilariously awkward interchange where she proceeds to go, "Can I?"
And he's like,
hot
yep.
potato him for a while, and then he's like, "Oh, yeah, come here." Because they think they're siblings. And there's also a line that I have a little bit of a bone to pick with there, where he said, "I don't believe it," but I kind of feel like that was a slightly heavy-handed attempt at getting into the idea of him still being attracted to her.
Yeah.
Because, like, there's a lot of angst and conflict that happens with Jace when he thinks Clary's his sister, because he still totally wants to get on that, and he's not sure if he's okay with it.
And she still wants to get on him.
And instead, they get on other people, and it doesn't end well. But they get through it.
They do get through
They
it.
do get through it eventually. And the lovely thing about the Mortal Instruments is that nobody really gets the short end of the stick.
No.
Like,
Everybody
everybody
turns out pretty
eventually
happy.
gets some and
Unless you're
likes
Valentine.
it. Well, I feel like he gets some of his crazy.
Yeah.
Valentine was never going to be happy. And they had the Falcon scene in, and we made really embarrassing noises during that because poor baby Chase.
Poor baby Chase.
We're like, no, not the thing. Like, they started the scene, and we were like, we know what's happening. We know what's coming. Don't do the thing, please. But they did the thing, and it was beautiful, if very sad.
So I also really liked showing that Clary can take care of herself.
Yeah,
When
Clary
she's fighting the
does a
demon
lot
in
of
the
kind of
apartment.
kicking ass, and she doesn't entirely kill it, but mostly because
But she beats the shit out of
she
it.
flame throws the fuck out of it. It's beautiful.
Also her apartment. She flamethrowers the fuck out of. She kind of blows it up.
A little bit.
Brooklyn.
Like, Clary is having none of your bullshit, and it's beautiful. And the sensor was missing, so she didn't technically kill it herself, but again, that would be a thing that would be kind of hard to visually illustrate without, like, taking a trip to the Department of Backstory and kicking out of the movie a little bit. There are certain things that in the book are very clearly and readily picked up, but would have been difficult to illustrate in a movie without getting bogged down by. And the censor was one of them. But Clary makes do with what she has, and it's awesome.
I also feel like if they just had a helpless heroine, then people
That's not what
wouldn't
these
be.
books are about. We don't do
okay
that
with
here.
it. They would just feel like, oh, this character's so one-dimensional. But no, she can be upset and she can be scared, but she can also kick ass.
And she also gets angry and gets in people's faces and does a lot of things. And we like that.
Also, I'm glad that we were talking about incest in Game of Thrones and the actress who plays Clary's mom plays Cersei Lannister on Game of Thrones.
Incest!
That's just too much.
But yeah, like, overall, it stayed pretty true to the movie, and
Yeah.
I think the thing thanks.
There was actually a
Again,
guy who
it's
came
like-
out because we all waited until the end of the credits because we're weird. And
We
because
wanted to make
something
sure
happened.
there wasn't anything else. We weren't done yet.
And there was one guy who actually said that it was closer to the book than he was expecting, and I think that just summed up all of our feelings. I'm a Percy Jackson fan.
Although I mostly just at it for like a year and a half. Because
I've only had since December.
I love Jamie Campbell Bower. I love him a lot. I loved him in everything that he's ever done. And when I found out that he was being cast as Jace, I was just like, the thing.
I didn't know how I was going to feel about it, but then I saw promo pictures and I saw the trailer, and I was okay with it.
He's fabulous. Like, he's so good. We love him so much. And he's taken to wearing the Morgenstern ring just around.
Just because he can. He likes
just
it.
wears it. And I'm like, let me love you. I just have so many feelings about Jamie Campbell Bower and him finally getting an actual movie because he spent a lot of time either getting things abruptly canceled on him, I'm looking at you, stars, or having bit parts or supporting parts where there wasn't a whole lot he could do, and he just was really awesome in this movie.
Except for feeling Joanna. Stealing Joanna.
He was fabulous as Sweeney Todd. Godfrey Gao spent most of the movie wearing underpants and a blazer, and we like it.
It was good. He wasn't in it as much as he was in the book, but that's okay.
I mean, he did show up in his creepy cloak and lurk over Alex and touch him a lot while he was healing him.
Yeah. That's alright. I hope he kept that cloak. That was a good cloak.
That was a really good cloak. Alright, do we have final thoughts?
Final thoughts. Read the book.
Read the book.
Go see the movie.
Don't read the book. Read
It was
all
good.
the books.
Buy the soundtrack even. Soundtrack was good.
It was pretty good. I had mixed feelings about listening to some of it independently, but the AFI songs were awesome.
Yeah. It made me excited about this new album.
And I keep wanting to say next week. We're not a weekly podcast. We're trying, but we're not there yet.
Next time.
Next time, we're going to be talking about vampires.
Oh, is that next time?
Because we need to do it.
We need to talk about all the vampires. There's so many of
We
them.
just need to talk about vampires, and we can talk about Simon with all the spoilers.
Oh, it's gonna be good.
It's gonna be awesome, because there are certain things that we still haven't said in this that pertain to Simon, and you should read all the books so you know the things.
I think that's good.
Yes, I think we're gonna call it a day, because we're still really sleep deprived, because we saw the movie last night. We're probably gonna see it again soon, because it's awesome.
Until next time, I'm PJ.
Oh, we have social
Oh.
media.
We do have social media.
We have a Twitter, which is LG Podcast. We have a Facebook, which I believe is Looking Glass Podcast. And we have a Tumblr by the same URL. Our email is also lookingglasspodcast@gmail.com. If you would like to contact us at any of those places, the email, feel free to send us thoughts, things that you disagree with, things that you want us to talk about. Anything, really. We like you guys. Talk at us.
I feel like the Facebook and the Tumblr is the easiest way to get a hold of us, though.
I mean, I check the email pretty frequently.
Okay.
We do check the Tumblr and the Facebook, though. We check all the things. So
If you want to get hold of her, email. If you want to get hold of me,
Tumblr! But yes, I think we have asks on the Tumblr. If
Yeah.
not, I will fix it momentarily. But the Twitter we will post, and the Facebook we will post when we have new episodes up, so keep an eye on those places. In terms of the Tumblr or the email, those are better places to get at us directly if you want to send in feedback, which you should. Or tell us what you want to see on the podcast next. And we would love to hear from you. Again, next time we'll be talking about vampires. All the vampires.
I'm PJ.
And I'm Dani, and this has been Looking Glass. Thank you guys